In the last video, I finished reassembling the engine. Now that I've gotten the right clutch installed, I can move on to installing the engine. The first thing I need to do is install a new throwout bearing. It's already lubed up, ready to go, and it should clip in pretty easily. I cleaned and lubed up the old clutch fork before sliding the new bearing on. It's important to use some, but not too much, grease on all the surfaces where there is friction. Now comes the hard part. I have to drop the engine in from the top since the core support doesn't come out. I have to be careful not to damage anything, especially that nice exhaust wrap. Then I need to do my best to line up the engine so the input shaft of the transmission can slide in. Getting the seat was difficult and took some adjustments. I just had to loosen up the turbo a little bit because it was hitting ever so slightly in the back. So now those studs are in at least. I've got it kind of lined up. The best I can. Well, it's all sealed up. I went in with a few bolts and carefully drove them in. I would have liked to do it all by hand, but there are these dowels down here that go into the bell housing that I'm quite certain you're not going to be able to get in by hand. They are kind of a tight fit, so that's the reason why I had to use bolts, but it's in now. The weight's still on the crane, so now I got to take my jack out down there underneath the transmission and try to get the engine mounts to line up. Okay, I got the right one in. I put the nut in from the bottom, and then when I lift up the engine, it fixes the right, so it lifts up to just the left side. Because I was having trouble lifting it up evenly. So now, I think the left one's in, so I'm going to drop it down and see if it lines up. Seems pretty good. Let's see if I can get this engine mount nut on. Nice. Okay, well, fast forward a bit and the engine's in and pretty much everything is connected. Got my belts on, I got the radiator in. I even have the air oil separator routed. I didn't cover too much of this stuff because it was really a nitpicky pain in the ass, but that air oil separator has like a 100-page install manual. I had to deviate a little bit, especially with the old PCV connector back there. But it's routed up, and it's connected to the coolant lines, and the intake manifold ports, and the valve cover ports as well. So that's all in. I need to double check everything, and then install the intercooler. And after I do that, I can fill it up with fluids, kick the battery, and then try cranking it and get some oil pressure. I'm going to add some engine oil braking additive. It's pretty much got like zinc and stuff in it. There's an anti-wear thing. We'll top it off with some motor oil. This is the only non-synthetic I could find in the right weight. It's cheap. It's only going to run for like 50 miles, so it's not a big deal. Next I pulled out the fuel pump fuse and cranked the engine to bring up the oil pressure. Alright, so I cranked the engine over a little bit. Fuel pressure came right on up. It tried starting, but not for long because there's no fuel pressure. So now I'm going to put the fuse back in and we'll try and start it. With the fuse back in, I primed the system, checked for leaks, and it all looked good, so I tried starting it. The smoke looks concerning, but it was just from the exhaust wrap and whatever grease and oils were on the headers. Leaking coolant from somewhere. I hope that's not bad. I did have a coolant leak from the turbo supply line, but this only needed some tightening up. I ran the engine at around 2,000 RPM for a while and kept topping off the coolant, making sure it didn't drop anymore. All seemed good, so I gave it a test drive. It's been a few months since the car has moved, so I was excited to get back on the roads. When driving it around, I did my best to vary the RPMs and do a lot of engine braking. I also had the wastegate bypass solenoid disconnected just to make sure it wouldn't make more than a few pounds of boost. To be safe, I had my access port connected and was constantly checking for knock. The compression ratio had been increased slightly from 8.4 to around 8.9, so I was worried this would cause problems. However, it's really only likely to happen at much higher RPMs under high load. For now, I was keeping it below $4,000 and less than half the model, so there really wasn't much of a reason for concern yet. The plan is to drive like this for about 50 miles and then do an oil change. The next oil change would be after another 500 miles, still with conventional oil. If everything went well, I'd be free to carefully increase boost, checking to make sure there's no knock. I plan on making a follow-up video on how it does after break-in, and then we'll see about some power upgrades. It'd be nice to do a turbo upgrade, maybe a TD05-20G. But it is kind of a rabbit hole because I need a better intercooler, a higher flowing fuel system, upgraded radiator, and probably even a flex fuel kit to be able to tune around the knock that will most likely start to occur. For now, I'm happy with how the car is driving, although it could use some new bushings and brakes. The power level previously was mostly satisfactory, so there's a chance I keep enjoying it how it is and trying to avoid spending another $5,000. Well, this almost concludes the whole EJ build series, at least the engine rebuild anyways. Now I can get back to the BMW E46 track car I'm building. As always, thanks for watching and feel free to like and subscribe.